All right, mics are live.
Begin. Commissioners, are we ready to begin as well?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, everyone, welcome to the chamber here at City Hall, and thank you for joining us both in person, online, and on the phone. And we'll all call to order the Planning Commission for the City of Catania on Monday, December 4th, 2023. Carla, can you do the attendance roll call for us, please?
Commissioner Long. Here. Commissioner Moffett.
Present.
Commissioner Berman.
Here.
Vice Chair Gilardi.
Here.
Chair Savage.
Here. Now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Move to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
I second.
Okay, Carla, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Long. Commissioner Moffett.
Aye.
Commissioner Berman.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gilardi.
Aye.
Chair Savage.
Aye. Do we have any changes to the agenda for this evening?
No changes, Chair Savage.
Okay. Now is the time when we have open public comment, and this is public comment for items that are not on the agenda for later during the meeting. There is a 3-minute time limit, and I'll raise my hand at the end of that 3 minutes, and we would ask if you have any additional comments to send them to either Carla or Noah here at the city staff. So do we have any individuals who would like to come forward and speak at this time? Carla, do we have anyone online or on the phone?
Thank you, Chair Savage. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Chair Savage, that'll end public comment.
All right, thank you, Carla. Next, we have our matters at hand, and the first is the consideration of a resolution recommending the City Council approval of entitlements to allow for construction of a 35-lot single-family home subdivision at 8841 Old Redwood Highway. And I'll turn this over to city staff.
Thank you, Chair Savage. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, perfect. And members of the commission, my name's JP Harries. I'm a senior planner with the city of Cotati. And tonight we're talking about Pink Viking. It's also gone by the name of Flayhaven Estates, but generally it's Pink Viking. And it's a 35-lot subdivision located at 8841 Old Redwood Highway. And you'll notice that PA number is a smaller number than you've probably seen, 1617, because as we move on, you'll see this application actually came in 2016. So it's been with the city for a while, or the developers have been working with the city for a while. And I'll explain some of that. Next slide, please. So the background is in 2016, the application originally came in as a 21-lot subdivision, larger homes, larger parcels. One of staff deemed the application incomplete at the time. One of the primary issues that staff had is it was proposing a density of 3 units per acre, and the allowable density on that particular site is between 4 and 6, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. So one of the issues we had with the 21-lot subdivision was it was not dense enough. And also the applicants realized that the mitigation measures for California tiger, salamander, the affordable housing agreements, park and lieu, was going to drive the cost of the project up, that the 21-lot subdivision was not going to be a viable subdivision for them. So at that time, we were starting internally to kind of toss ideas around for a cottage housing ordinance. The applicant was interested in that ordinance as being possible a viable project for them. And actually, Brian and Dan Hill, the architect, and by the way, I will say that the entire design team is here tonight, so if there's questions, you can feel free to ask them. They actually worked very closely with us in helping to design that ordinance by producing draft site plans as we generated ideas, reviewing ordinance language. And it took us several years to work through that process. We finally adopted that ordinance in 2021. Ultimately, what we concluded is it would probably not be viable for that site because of the number of units. It would basically drive the unit count very high. And it would not, and it'd be largely more of attached type housing, and there is a strong feeling that it would not be supported by the neighbors, and it would be inconsistent with kind of the community character out there, and as it transitions from rural residential to the neighborhoods that we're used to. Also during that time, they did, at the kind of requests of people living over in Clothier, removed some eucalyptus trees along the western boundary of the property. And also, there used to be some old agricultural buildings out there, old chicken coops that largely were demolished and cleaned up. And that all happened around 2021. In September of 2021, they submitted to staff a proposal for a 35 lot subdivision. It wasn't a formal submittal, it was more of a kind of, what do you think? We decided to take that and have a neighborhood meeting, which we held on October 27th, 2021. We held it here at City Hall. And the primary issues that came out of that the people were concerned that it was too dense, too many units per acre. They were worried about loss of the open space that exists there and animals that live on that site. They were concerned about privacy and what the traffic impacts would be. Those were the primary issues that we heard from that. And then on May 26 of 2022, they made their formal submittal of this 35-unit subdivision. And that is the one that's under review now. It's gone through some tweaks, including the site plan changes. But here's where we're at today. Next slide, please. So the project itself is 35 lots. They range from 6,000 square feet to 12,212 square feet. And there will be terrace lots. It also includes a new road from Old Redwood Highway with a little stub road that goes down to the southern border of the property line. And those are proposed to be public streets in anticipation that over time, it will become part of the street network of Cotati. They have 5 floor plans, which they can be reversed, and there's 3 different siding treatments per floor plan. And all homes have the option to be constructed as a single-family dwelling or a single-family dwelling and ADU. And I want to explain this because I think there's been some confusion. There's basically 5 home plans, and the home plans can either be, and they all will look the same, or they can either be constructed as a single-family dwelling, or within that same plan can be constructed as an ADU with a single-family dwelling also. So basically, if it's a 2-story house, the upper level becomes the ADU, or vice versa, and then the bottom floor would become the primary. And in your packets, you can see the different floor plan options. So these would be presented as options to the buyer, whether or not they want to have just a single-family dwelling with that particular plan. We already know what plans are going to go on which parcel, or if they want to have it with a single-family dwelling plus accessory dwelling. It means reduced living space for the single-family dwelling. Then that's how it's done. So it's not an attachment to, though, even if they did choose to have a single-family dwelling, they could in the future, add an ADU or convert a garage.
So the houses won't be built until they're purchased, and the buyer would determine that at that time.
That's right. And then, as with any subdivision, there'll be landscaping throughout the subdivision, lighting, utilities. It does include some off-site improvements. Those will be the sidewalks and frontage improvements, curb gutter along Old Red Highway, utility connections. Right now, there's overhead utilities that run along the frontage. Those will be undergrounded per our requirements. And they'll be widening Old Redwood Highway, the west side of Old Redwood Highway, to add either center turn lane or a dedicated turn lane. And that will have to be worked out, especially when you look at Clothier right there. We want that all to be a smooth center connecting turn lane. So that will address the ins and outs of that project.
JP, are there any ongoing homeowner fees to maintain landscaping and lighting in the community?
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
Are there any homeowner fees going on forward to maintaining utilities and landscaping in the
They
community?
they will have to, as a part of the subdivision, enter into what's called the Community Facilities District. It's essentially, they annex into this district, and they will have to do that, yeah.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So the entitlements and approvals for this project are many. There's a tentative map. This is a subdivision map. This is what we review for approval. They're proposing a vesting tentative map, and that just simply means that any changes in fees or city regulations that might come after their approval will not affect them. They get vested. If there's any changes in state or federal law, those would apply to the applicant, but it simply vests them from any changes in city rules. It's common when you get a tentative map, you almost always just add the word vesting to it, and that's all it takes, and then you have a vesting tentative map. Preliminary design review, which is what we're going to do tonight. It requires a hillside development permit for lots, and I should say 14 through 19, not 13 through 19, which are the far western lots of this property. That, just so that you're aware, that what that means is there's certain ways that you treat those lots subject to the hillside development permit. One of them is a reduced cover, and I'll touch on this a little more. There's increased side setbacks and reduced front setbacks. There's terrace limits on, how tall you can build a wall. And it prohibits structures on anything over 15% grade. And also require a tree removal permit, 60 trees on site. Some of those may be on neighboring properties or they're shared along a fence line. So that number is maybe not exactly accurate, but there's 62 trees that we've identified on the site or immediately next to it that we want to make sure preserve, or excuse me, that we're looking at. 9 of those will remain and 53 will be removed. And the result is 186 trees will need to be planted as part of this subdivision. And then future approvals will be final design review. That will be done at a staff level that's proposed right now with, it's called a design review administration. It is staff, and then we also work with an architect. There will have to be 2 things that go to the city council after this approval, and one will be the inclusionary housing agreement, as well the street names, and that will go before, well, let me go down. Then there'll be a final map, but so between the final map approval, we'll have to bring the inclusionary housing agreement and the street names to the city council for approval. On street names, Cotati has a history of naming its streets after historical Cotati figures or pioneering figures. So there's a condition in the approval or in the resolution that requires the applicant to work with staff and the Historical Society. And actually I had a recommendation for a name today for naming those streets. So what you see on there, Viking Way and Longship Way Lane, will not be the final street names. Is there anything else I wanted to say about that? No. And then the improvement plans, those are the plans that if you approve the subdivision, that's all the infrastructure. That's the streets and the plumbing and all the guts of the subdivision. And then construction permits, and that would be for the actual construction and the grading. Okay, next slide, please. I don't know if you could see that there. It's a little bit difficult to see, but it's the red star. It's that rectangular parcel. It's at the very southern edge of Cotati on Old Redwood Highway, kind of between, well, I guess as close as cross street would be Eucalyptus. And next slide, please. This is a view, an aerial view from Google, looking west so that you can see in the view there's 3 residences that are currently being rented in the front of the property. And you can see Clothier Lane on the right of the property And that's just kind of looking up the slope, so you can see what it was, what it looks like now. There used to be agricultural buildings largely on the left or southern side of the property, and the stand of eucalyptus ran across that property line at the rear of the property. Next slide, please. So the land use designation, this comes from the general plan. The general plan dictates, excuse me, dictates what the zoning is and what's acceptable in an envisioned development for this property. And you'll see that it's located in LMDR, which is low medium density residential. This is basically single family and duplex type development that would be allowed. Duplexes are more constrained to corner type areas. And it allows for up to 6 units per acre. This application is proposing 5 units per acre. It has had this designation for as long as I know, looking back. So this isn't a new designation. The map I was looking at a couple of months ago was a 1993 map. It had the same zoning on this. So this has been anticipated by the city for this level of development for many years, decades. Next slide, please. From the general plan, we put together the zoning map, and that implements the general plan. And you will see that it belongs in the NL neighborhood district. These are the most common districts that you see on the east side of Cotati. These are the kind of the standard subdivision, suburban type subdivision. And again, it restricts the development to single family and duplexes. It has a minimum of 4 units per acre and a maximum of 6 units per acre. So there is a minimum and maximum. This project proposes 5, kind of right in the middle of what we expect for development there. It has a 28-foot maximum height and 40% coverage. Now, when you get into the hillside development, some of these standards change. For example, it's 30% coverage on the hillside parcels. The front setback is normally 20 feet, and hillside development, it can be reduced to 10. Again, you're always trying to minimize the impact on the land from a hillside development project by minimizing the footprint and separating it from its neighbors more. The rear setback is normally 20 feet, and it is in some of these along the lower part of this project. So the eastern part of this project will be applied normal NL standards, and it's just those upper parcels that are going to have these other different standards applied to it. But on the side setback on a hillside development goes from 5 and 7 feet to 10 feet. And then parking is the same throughout. It's 2 garage covered. It doesn't have to be garage, it could be carport, but it has to be 2 covered spaces.
And there's no street parking, it's all in the garage and on the parking
They
drives.
can't,
Is there street parking?
street parking would be permissible.
Okay.
Yep.
The units that would be determined for the back, those 14 through 19, could they be any of the 5 designs? 2-story, single story? Are they gonna
No, we're really looking at the one particular design, that's Plan 5. And the reason is that creates the smallest footprint. And because you get squeezed up there by squeezing on the sides and the rear. So Plan 5 is really the one that allows us to.
Is that a
do the
2-story or
development.
1-story plan?
It's a 2-story development, and we talked about 1-story development up there, but given the footprint size, the way you get squeezed, it would look like pretty small homes up there. And it wouldn't appear to be compatible with kind of Clothier Lane style of development.
So the buyer would only have that one option?
In every case, every lot is already assigned
Oh, it is.
a particular model. Now, they could flip, mirror the model And they probably can choose what kind of siding option they want, provided probably it's not identical to the one right next door or something, but yeah, right now we've plotted it so that each lot, we already know what plan will go on which lot. Next slide, please. So this is a site layout, it's relatively straightforward. It's just one street that goes from east to west, ends in a cul-de-sac. There's a stub street to the south that would end at the property line there. Realize to the south is county, that's not currently part of Cotati. Any development there in the future would, we would have to be annexed into the city before we would have any authority over development of that property. So when you see what's a future road, realize that's just concept only. It's just like, if this is going to be annexed in the future, how would we connect the street network? And that's just attempting to show. We have no intention of building that road right now, or acquiring that property, or annexing that property or anything, but we just need to make sure that the developments that we approve are considerate and thoughtful of how development might occur in the future and accommodate for it. What's a little bit unusual, excuse me, is you see these flag lots. There's a few of those there. Typically, we discourage flag lots. We prefer people to have just the straight frontage, but often you end up in an area where you do have to flag. And by flag, I mean you have like the parcel and then the driveway that kind of goes out. So it's considered like a flag, and then the driveway is the pole. So that gets this name, flag lot. And then we have a few of those down there, especially up at the top and then towards the southern side. Lighting along the streets, fire hydrants are included, sidewalks, parking, frontage improvements along Old Redwood Highway. There'll also be some bioretention facilities there, and then landscaping throughout, especially in the front yards and along Old Redwood Highway.
And just for my own clarification, after the initial purchase, there's no homeowners association to replace or maintain landscape, that's all done?
Now, there
The
will have to
owners-
be some sort of a maintenance agreement or an association
okay.
because of the maintenance of the bioretention facilities.
Okay. And this potential future road, is that to be just left grassland, or? is there a
Well,
plan
that's
for
somebody
that,
else's
or
property right now.
Even the part that comes down from the street is someone else's?
Are you looking on the shaded on the site plan? I'm sorry.
Right in the middle,
Yeah.
the one that would be the road into any future development. You said you're not gonna build that road now.
Oh, no, the stub will be built
Oh,
to the
stub will
property
be-
line.
Okay,
But where that property line is, no.
is where, so, okay, that's
Yeah.
why I wasn't clear on that.
I'm sorry
Thank you.
about that.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, it will look like it appears
The
there.
street, okay.
Yeah.
Can you speak more about the bioretention facility?
So the bioretention facilities, they're actually kind of spread out at each end of, and Charlie can hear, the engineer can really clarify anything that you might have questions about it. But during the storm, during a rainstorm, the water is collected, it will be delivered initially to some sort of like infiltration area on the property, on the lot, or it will be delivered through to the street, in which case it will flow down and then go to these bioretentions, which are basically landscape depressions where the water will go, and it has a certain capacity. They're designed for a particular storm, like a, like what do you call it, like a 2-hour storm every 2 years? I can't remember the dialogue, but it's a certain storm that they design for, 2 inches.
So the state requires the city to plan to accommodate the amount of rainfall that would occur in what they call a 2-year event and a 10-year event. So you probably hear of 100-year storms. Those are, imagine, a 2-year storm and a 10-year storm. And we have to plan for that amount of water to fall on the site and then be captured and treated and then re-infiltrated back into the ground rather than just put into a storm drain out to the drainage.
I think I'm most familiar with the new ones in Kessing Ranch. But I don't see anything of the size and scope of those. Why would that be?
I don't know, Charlie, do you want to address that question?
Good evening. My name is Charlie Trabulsi. I'm the civil engineer on the project. So the typical section that we have for the roadside bioretention system is you end up with a 7.5-foot planter strip between the back of the curb and the sidewalk. And to make sure that we're able to have enough volume to percolate the water that enters that system from the storm drain system in the whole project, is you end up trenching down 3 to 4 feet and replacing the existing ground with soil that allows for more percolation and storage. So we ran the calculations on that, and we were able to make it work with that bioretention system on the perimeter of the road between the curb and the back of, and the front of the sidewalk.
You're talking the road, you mean Old Redwood Highway?
No, actually, the new road that we're installing.
Okay.
Correct. The new roads that we're installing as part of our project.
So it would be between, sorry. So it would be between the sidewalk and the road?
Between the sidewalk and the back of the curb, yes, essentially the road.
Okay.
We've used that on many other projects here and in Santa Rosa, and it works quite well.
Do you happen to have a visual? I'm a very visual person.
It's not fair, but I'll show you. Sheet 4 of the tentative map, if you like. That's the back of the curve. Yes.
So it's become kind of a trend for development to utilize the planter strip, which is a required kind of decorative feature, landscaped area to provide a buffer between traffic and pedestrians, essentially to serve two functions and then also to provide stormwater treatment. And as Mr. Trabulsi mentioned, it is a common kind of feature that we've been seeing as we've been trying to get more efficient with how we use the land.
Now, in the case that we have a 1,000-year storm or a 500-year storm, or there's a pipe that's plugged, et cetera, there's sort of a spillway system that allows the excess water to enter into the storm drain system that goes down to Old Redwood Highway that ties into the existing storm drain system that we have there. So there's an escape route, if you like to call it that.
Will you also be using permeable driveways or permeable sidewalks to help with water?
Yes.
So sidewalks and driveways, just driveways?
Driveways, yes. I don't know if the city of Cotati allows driveways, yes. I don't know if the city of Cotati allows sidewalks or not.
Our public works standards do not accommodate permeable concrete, and I will say we've been pushing to get away from the permeable concrete. We've just had a lot of issues with it. It kind of gets full of sediment, and then you have a challenge in maintaining. But the developer has many options for what materials they use for those driveways to meet the stormwater requirements.
We were asked to make sure the calculations work without using permeable concrete anywhere. So this is a very conservative approach that we took.
Why don't I complete my presentation and then we can bring Charlie and the applicant back up again. Next slide, please. These are the proposed designs. They are, the kind of the California Craftsman farmhouse style, little bungalow features with the wood treatments that you see, the gables with the exposed rafters, lighted windows that are single or double hung, just pretty typical of the patterns that our design guidelines require and attractive. And there's also front porch elements to these that are hard to see in these images. Fencing around the yards. And in some cases, there's a technique of the terracing where the downhill portion of the wall becomes kind of a foundational wall, so that you don't have to create terracing within the yard. And it's a little complicated. I don't want to get into it unless you're really interested in it, but it will, I think, be able to, it will create this nice kind of terrace approach to the development, as opposed to sloping, radical sloping within the person's yard. Next slide. So the primary planning considerations were, of course, design review, and that was the architecture and the compliance with our design guidelines. The site layout, which we discussed. The landscaping, generally they're proposing a pretty good landscape. We'll probably tweak it. I think we'd like to see more natives than it's in there. Then we'll probably do that as well. We'll have it reviewed by a landscape consultant that works for the city, just to get their blessing on it. They are also qualified to examine the proposed irrigation systems to make sure that they comply with our water efficient landscape ordinance. But that is a final design review aspect. But what you see in there, just expect that there'll be some tweaking to it. And city services. So we have examined the project, and there's nothing that would prevent development of this project, either in terms of providing water or sewer capacity or police services or fire services, or any services that would prevent servicing the project and avoiding any kind of health and safety welfare issue. Same applies to subdivision standards. There are specific standards in terms of like lot size, for example, like NL has the minimum lot size of the 6,000 square feet. So that constrains what you can do with the property. You can't make small lot subdivision on this particular property. It does have to have a minimum lot size. It does have to have frontage, or else that flag lot. It will have to meet, the streets have to comply to Cotati city standards. The site has to be suitable enough to accommodate the development. The environmental impacts have to either be mitigated or avoided. And then they can't create any health and safety issues. And then again, with the hillside development, what we were basically looking to make sure that there was a reduced footprint and coverage, no development on 15% slopes, that the setbacks are appropriate, and that there's no violation of like a visible ridge and development on top of a ridge. In this case, if you look up the slope, there's a minor ridge at about 200 feet of elevation, and it's already developed with homes. So when you look up that slope, you'll see that there's already homes on that ridge. That's if you're standing at Old Redwood Highway. If you could raise yourself up in the air a little bit, you'd see there's a more prominent ridge behind kind of where Cypress Avenue runs, and that's outside of our authority to protect. But this project won't have any impact on any of that. Any kind of ridge line. Next slide, please. The tree removal I discussed, there were approximately 60 trees that were removed in 2021, and we talked about what would be remaining. Actually, the applicant has already planted 12 trees at the request of one of the neighbors, because they were concerned about privacy issues that this project would present. And Brian, eager to work with the neighbors generally, and started planting trees already for their privacy concerns. It does have an inclusionary housing agreement requirement, and it will require 5 affordable units. We don't know exactly what the level of those will be at this point, so we're talking about very low income, or moderate income. But we will have to have that affordable housing agreement worked out and approved before we sign off on the final map. And that will have to go through city council approval.
On the affordable sites, will they all be designated like low or moderate, or do you have to have a mix within those 5?
Well, generally, our code requires a 33%, basically a third, very low, low, and medium. What we don't know is how that's gonna break down when you have 5. So it could be 2 medium, 2 low, and 1 very low, or it could be 2 very low. There's other factors, because there's already residents on the site, and I'm gonna talk about this in a minute. We have to make sure that we maintain the affordability level of those properties. And they're rather small. They could be low or very low. But this will be part of what we work out in that inclusionary housing agreement, exactly what that ratio is. And there's our RENA numbers, which can come into play as well. And those are the lots, 1, 8, 23, 33, 35, and they're utilizing 3 different plans. So not everyone's getting stuck with the small house or something like that, you know, there are a variety and they're spread throughout the development. As far as traffic, traffic was was considered to be pretty much insignificant. The worst impact was a 0.2 second delay at the intersection with Myrtle, Valparaiso, and Old Redwood Highway during the peak hour, which was the morning peak hour. So no impacts to intersections or roadway capacity. However, they are going to construct a center turn lane or a dedicated turn lane on Old Redwood Highway, which will ease the access and into and out of the development. Next slide, please. Oops. Park and Lieu. The property is not developing any parks. There's an act called the Quimby Act, which allows the city to, and it's a part of our policies for housing development, that they provide, or they either provide parks or they pay a park and lieu fee. So in this case, the ratio, the calculation is in the code. So, in this case, they will need to either purchase or pay us for 0.54 acres of parkland. And then lastly, a housing element. Within the housing element, there's a discussion about the RENA numbers. This is our regional housing needs allocation. This project in the 2023 housing element is identified as a project in progress and is contributing to our commitment to provide housing. And then, okay, and then I guess that's pretty much it. There are 2 extra conditions of approval that I'm recommending the Planning Commission add that were not included in this packet. And that is that as part of final design review, the permittee shall reduce the proposed height of Plan 5 from 29 to 28 feet. This brings it consistent with the NL development standards. And then the other condition is that the permittee shall comply with California Government Code Section 66300D. And this is the government code section which establishes the requirements for the replacement of those residential units that exist on site, as well as it gives specific rights to the occupants of those homes, and that can be relocation assistance or first right of refusal on the affordable units that exist. There's several things that can apply to them.
Are those all rental properties?
They are right now, yeah. And they are all being rented. All right, next slide, please. So just in closing, something you may have not seen before, we're using a particular section of the code. It's not quite an exemption, but it's a requirement within the CEQA law. And I will say that Olivia Irvin with M Group is here, who's our kind of CEQA expert. And basically what we found is that the project is consistent with the general plan and zoning. And given that, CEQA law requires that you use a section called 15183, which means you basically, your analysis tiers from the general plan EIR. Within the EIR for the general plan are all the potential impacts that can be expected if you develop to what's envisioned in the general plan, and it provides mitigation measures to address those impacts. And then you, when you're reviewing a project that is consistent with general plan and zoning, you apply the mitigation measures that are applicable to that project that's under review, the mitigation measures that come from the general plan, EIR. And you'll see those conditions of approval, kind of parse them out. Some of them repeat other conditions of approval, but we wanted to make sure that the document, what's identified in the environmental document is clearly identified in the conditions of approval, and those are numbers 93 through 124. And did you want to add anything to that, Olivia? Okay. Next slide. So that's it, my presentation. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission conduct the public hearing and adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval of the vesting tentative map, preliminary design review, hillside development permit, tree removal permit, to allow the construction of a 35-lot single-family home subdivision on a 7.1 acre parcel at 8841 Old Redwood Highway. And with that, I'm available for any questions, comments. And like I said, Olivia is here from M Group to help with any questions about the environmental, as well the design team and the project applicant are here. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. Do we have any questions from the commissioners?
Just a couple questions. One thing that I noticed when looking through the plan set, there's a minimum coverage of 6,000 or max, right, for each site.
There's a minimum lot. Excuse me. There's a minimum lot size.
Sorry, yeah, minimum
Yeah.
lot size of 6,000.
Yeah.
One of the lots came in a little below that. I was wondering if that was, I think it was lot 34. If you look in the civil plans, it was not that much below, but it came in at like 5,900 and something.
I thought each one was right at 6,000.
So I was just wondering if there was like a special exemption for that lot. It's on page,
34, you said, lot 34?
yeah, lot 34, sheet 3 of 12 of the civil plans. Is the legend.
So regardless of if there's a minor discrepancy with the tentative map, the final map process will require that all lots meet the zoning standards, and that 6,000 square foot would be the minimum.
Okay, so there's no exemptions being made, it was just a.
No, and it could, if it's necessary, it could reach into 33 a little bit. There's plenty of room. You are right, it's a minimum, it's very small,
Yeah,
but, okay, yeah. I think it's because that corner got shaved where the lot, anyway, I'll make sure that it gets fixed there.
and then, with the frontage improvements, are those gonna kind of mirror what was already done in the northern part of the street of Old Redwood Highway, as far as kind of the landscaping and sidewalk?
Yeah.
Has there been any kind of design around those improvements?
No, they'll carry that same design
Yeah.
south.
And then.
And including even where, like Lasker and Clothier, there's certain patterning in the sidewalk or in the street. That will be incorporated into this project as well.
And that's in the resolution, those kind of conditions.
That condition about the street, well, one, the plans show the continuation of the sidewalks. We didn't have to condition that, and they show the frontage improvements. It did not show kind of the stamped asphalt, or it's actually, I don't know if it's actual stamp or if it's actual stone in there, but there's a particular pattern that's been in use. That is a condition of approval, that they match that pattern. That's at the bottom of Lasker and Clothier where it meets.
That's
Old
throughout the whole city, that's throughout the whole city, or there's a lot of sidewalks do it.
The pattern that is there is a little bit different than the stamp pattern that you may see right outside City Hall. It's a different type of pattern.
And then the park and lieu fees, when do those fees get determined?
When do they get determined? Prior to building permits,
Being issued?
issuance of building permits. And then there's been a practice of either paying that whole park and lieu fee up front or applying a percentage of that fee per unit that's developed.
That'd be paid out over time.
Yeah, they basically pay, and, you know, before we would issue a building permit for each one of the units.
Yeah. And do those go into the general fund of the city, or do those go into like a designated fund?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's, all the impact fees are allocated specifically to address, what they're intended to impact, so, or offset the impacts of. So because new folks living in town need additional recreation facilities, those park and lieu fees are specifically for the development of new parklands. Traffic mitigation fees are specifically for making traffic, infrastructure improvements to reduce traffic impacts, et cetera.
Great. And then the hillside development finding, it talked about the upper hillside coming in at 14.5%, the maximum grade. Was there, I'm assuming there's surveying done to determine that grade?
yeah.
And then not being able to develop on a 15% grade, does that mean if they level it out, would they be able to develop on it? Or if it was before 15, then they could never?
No, you can't, excuse me, you can't go into the areas where there's 15% grade. And let me be clear, there's, on a property like that where you can go up, there's, especially that was used for agricultural purposes, there are some terracing where you'll see like a strip that's like that. That's not the kind of hillside we're talking about. We're talking about, you know, where the hillside really moves itself up into a natural slope, not an artificial area. So where we see that predominantly is on the southwest lot and that corner. That is where it really truly gets into, it's a 15% grade. So no, they have to stay out of that steeper area. They can't just terrace it and say, well, it's not 15% at all. The idea is to preserve that hillside.
So there were, on the property, there are some portions that are 15 and they've just been restricted from developing that.
That's right. It's largely that lot 18.
Yeah.
Or, I want to say 18, but it's that southeastern lot. Lot 18.
That is all I have for right now.
Question on off-site improvements. I'm assuming it's included in it, but I didn't see it listed anywhere. When they do the improvements on Old Braid, you're also going to continue the bicycle lane?
There is a class 2 right now. That will be maintained. So, yeah.
Okay. And thank you. I'd asked you ahead of time about trees. That there's 9. Do we know the types of those trees that are to be preserved?
They range from Monterey cypress to oak to silver elm. And I think there's 2 different varieties of oak. There's a large black oak, and I think one's a live oak.
And I asked you this earlier already about the inclusionary housing, so I'm glad to see that's going to be part of this project. And I also noticed the use of hardy board on the siding, which, you know, with insurance companies these days, it's difficult to get insurance as it is. I was wondering if there was any consideration into metal roofing, which is more fire retardant than other types of roofing. Because I know especially so many people have to go into the FAIR plan because insurance companies aren't writing policies.
Yeah.
All those types of little things actually can add up to a discount in your premium through the FAIR plan.
We didn't discuss it. That's the bottom line. I think that maybe when the architect comes up a little bit later, you can address that question. But no, we did not address metal roofing during the design review.
And the other thing, again, you answered this ahead of time for me, and I appreciate it as far as street naming. When Thomas Page first laid out this community, he honored all of his sons. But at the time, women were never considered important, unfortunately. And so I'd like to see consideration for the naming. He has 3 daughters, Anita, Manuela, and Elizabeth, and also his wife, Anna. If those could be put out as future uses of names to be honored. And I think that's it now. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, JP. I was wondering about a gray water aspect. The time to do it would be when you're in your building. Have we thought about that?
Not till I talked to you earlier today. No, we hadn't incorporated that into the project design.
And we talk about very low income, and moderate income. Can you just give me the ballpark figures of what very low, and moderate income looks like? And I just want to know the amount of money that is and what the house would cost for that as well.
I have to look that up.
Thank you.
Did you want to ask another question while Noah does that?
Yeah, well, I thought Carl Schulman just passed away, and he was beloved by everybody, which is unusual in this town. So, I thought that would be an appropriate. We've got 2 streets, we've got a Carl and a Schulman, and that would be, to me, a really nice honor for Carl and his family.
We'll add that to Ed's recommendation as well. There's a condition, I don't know if I think I did say, yeah, that we're gonna ask that we work with the Historical Society, and we'll take any recommendations that people have and bring those to the city council. And it will ultimately be their decision. And we'll do that before we get to final map, because we want all the documents to show the proper street names that are going to be recorded and everything. So I don't have a timeline on that, but we're already moving. So if all depends on what happens here and at city council.
Kimberly?
Yeah. A couple questions kind of relating to neighbors on the other side on Clothier. Are their fences, I've, driven by and looked at it, several of those fences are fairly low, which I understand would be what my fence would look like. Are you planning on redoing the neighbor fences as well? Okay, and what height would those fences be at?
Unless otherwise approved by the commission, I believe the city Cotari policy is 6-foot fence.
Okay,
In some areas, they've asked us, different jurisdictions have asked us to go 6 foot with 2-foot lattice to accommodate the privacy issue for both sides. So we're flexible on that, but minimum 6 foot because that's what the city requires.
okay.
I think it is 6 feet, but what we could do right now is allow for 2 feet of lattice on top of that 6 feet. That helps to preserve privacy. It is permissible by the code. It's just that it has to be done in a public hearing forum. And it's very common for people to do it, even if, we don't have eyeballs or approval. We're starting to see that people are adding that little lattice piece. So I think if there's a desire from the planning commission to see that, we can absolutely add that right now, and it would be fine.
Okay. I'm also looking at some of the hill grading, and especially at the comment that we received about lot 14, and knowing that the other side of that hill is already very heavily terraced. Has there been engineering to look at how far that hill's already been cut back and how much of basically a spine is going to be left between the two properties?
It's not a secret. I was told to be prepared to answer that question.
I know, and the email said you would be, and I'm waiting for it.
So the first thing I did was call the soils engineer. And so bear with me a little bit. You know, these engineers, you ask them what time it is, they tell you how to make a watch. So, but the background information I think is important. He said, first and foremost, emphasize to the commission that this site doesn't have any slides, doesn't have any existing areas of instability.
Okay.
And we have very firm soil 2 foot down and bedrock 4 to 6 foot down. So everything indicates, based on the detailed soils analysis that he did, that whatever grading we do on our site is not going to be an issue for the neighbors. With that said, I told him, you know, the neighbors are concerned. What do you do when the neighbors are concerned about the grading and how it may or may not impact their slope, their swimming pool, their house, their concrete walkways? He suggested, and I ran it by JP, that we volunteered that the city adds a condition that says prior to the commencement of grading, the soils engineer, the grading contractor, the developer, and the owners that are interested attend a meeting so we can explain to them what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how we're doing it, and take pictures so that if there is an impact, it can be addressed. So, and he reminded me, I did a lot of projects with him in Fountain Grove, that sometimes that's an issue, especially if you have unstable soils next door, unstable soils. And on this side, based on the data he has, he's not concerned. But he said offer to make that a condition as one of the conditions of approval. So if the engineering or the planning department can accommodate that, we'll be happy to accept that as a condition.
Wouldn't it be more prudent to examine both sides of the hills before excavation happens and before there's an issue? Because if the condition is simply, if the hill falls down, we'll deal with it, we should look and see if the hill's gonna fall down first.
Agreed. So perhaps I wasn't clear. There's a detailed soils report already that was required by the city and submitted as part of this package. And this soils report indicates that if we use standard construction equipment, we are not proposing anything on a project that, or on this site, where there's any slides or any instability issues. They don't anticipate, they've already said, we don't anticipate any issues. Now, in addition to that, when it comes time to get the actual grading permit and the building permit for each house, the soils engineer will be required to analyze what the structural engineer did as far as the foundation requirements. How far down are we going? Let's take one more look at this. Let's make sure the bearing is correct. Let's make sure the slabs are the appropriate thickness. So there'll be another look at this prior to pulling the grading permits, as well as the structural permits for each and every house when it comes to doing the foundations. But in addition to that, he's suggesting, let's also have a meeting prior to the commencement of construction, so this way everybody knows what's going on.
And are you planning on going and seeing the other side of that hill
Absolutely.
beforehand?
And
'Cause I
notification
believe-
will be required and provided for by the neighbors prior to us entering those sites.
Okay. Because I got to live through a new development being put right next to us. I live on Feller. And I know that the compacting portion of building a new development can be severe. You know, a couple broken dishes, kind of severe, living next to. So it worries me when I see a concern from the neighborhood that they're worried about a hill or they're worried about the structural elements of their house, because I've felt what that compacting feels like.
It's a reasonable concern.
Okay.
Around that grading permit conditions, I think it's on page 249 of that packet, and there's a couple conditions in there already. So this would be an additional condition that we would add to that for the grading permit?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that we should consider adding to that section around the condition? Or are these three conditions, do we feel they're sufficient enough?
I believe they're sufficient enough.
Okay. All right, now's when we come to the portion of the public comment. So if you have comments that you would like to make regarding this, you'll have, pardon?
Chair Savage, I'm sorry. Just to be clear, we'll add that condition, but I want to examine if that's the appropriate place to add it. We may
Okay.
want to do it as part of the improvement plan process before we get to issuing grading permits.
Okay,
So
all right, you can decide.
I think it would,
Of course.
to Kimberly's comment, more prudent than,
And was there an answer for me?
yes, thank you. So very low income would be for a family of four, would be $62,900, which would translate to a housing cost of $1,750 per month. Low income is $91,500. That's annual income for a family of four, household income, which translates to a housing cost of $2,500 per month. And median income for a family of four, household family of four, is $112,600, which translates to a housing cost of $3,100 per month.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we come to the portion for public comment. We allot 3 minutes for comments. At the end of the 3 minutes, I'll raise my hand. If you have any additional comments, you can send those to city staff. So do we have anyone who would like to come forward and speak? That's, I believe you'd need to come forward to do that, yeah. Yes, come forward.
My name's George Malcolmus. I'm in
Oh,
8920.
apologies, I'm just gonna interrupt. We're having some issues with our timer. We're trying to find an alternate method. Apologies. We do have another timer somewhere.
She talking to me?
Well, she's talking to all of us, I believe.
My hearing isn't that great. so-
Carla, I can set the time.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm at 8920 Clothier Lane, so it's the one with the pool that's up on the top. My eyes aren't so good either, so I'm not quite sure what lot this is, but it looks like when I went on the big, that the one lot is too close to the fence line. I think is that 14? It's at the flag, the east side of the flag. And I'm wondering if they don't need to move that single-story house just a little closer to the street to have distance there. And I guess I just wanted a question, maybe they could clarify a little bit. This drainage that they're putting along the whole side of I guess that's the north side, our fencing. They have a planned drain to go down that whole hill where you're talking about the concern about the slide and that sort of thing. I'm wondering if they could just comment a little bit on the retaining walls they're planning there. It looks like multiple ones, plus the drain and how deep they're putting that. And I assume that's catching the water coming from the uphill side on the west. But that's the main two comments. The other thing I would question, and I don't know if this is really an ordinance or anything, but 10, 12 years ago when they did a design here, which was totally different, total different developer, and they just had a few lots up on the top related to the cul-de-sac. they said that they did it that way because there was a fire ordinance that allowed only a certain distance to be able to come up and drive the fire engine around without a cross street. And so, like Honor and that new construction to the south that's been built, the north, they all have side streets other ways out. But in this case, they can only come up from Redwood. So that original plan they had like 12, 14 years ago, I don't know if anybody remembers that, they had the cul-de-sac, a good 50 to, feet lower, closer to Redwood, and they had these huge lots up on the top. So I don't know, I haven't been able to find anything out about fire ordinance. I don't know if that was just BS because they didn't want to mess with the eucalyptus trees at that time. But anyway, those are some thoughts.
Thank you.
Would you like
wanna
me to
address-
respond?
Yeah.
The setback. What? Okay, yeah, Noah's recommending we complete the hearing and then I'll
Okay.
respond to the
All right.
questions.
Adrian, did you want to speak?
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you to everyone. This is obviously a lot of work has gone into this, a lot of thought. And, I always hesitate to come up and say, I don't really like the outcome, but I'm going to say that because my work in the community is homelessness. And so I am acutely aware of the homeless crisis and the housing crisis. And it's kind of appalling to me that we have 300 pages worth of stuff, and there's nothing there that says we have a housing crisis with people in this community who don't have a place to live. And I think we feel like we walk around Cotati, we walk up Clothier Lane, and we think, we're kind of all doing okay. But that is not true. And if you know what to look for, you will find people in Cotati who have no place to lay down tonight. If you look a little further, you will find a lot of people living in RVs in somebody's driveway. And then if you look a little deeper, you will find that a lot of people in Cotati have had to either move or they're up in the homeless system in Santa Rosa or in Petaluma. So we do have a homeless crisis here, and really that's a crisis of poverty. That's a crisis where the wages that are being offered to low-income workers, to manual laborers and entry-level workers do not match the housing opportunities. And I think we all know this. I talk in a lot of organizations, a lot of things. I say, how many people do you here have someone or know someone who's at risk of losing their housing? And it doesn't matter if I'm in a rich crowd or a middle-income crowd, people raise their hands. So I'm not going to insult any of you by thinking you don't know about this, but it's a problem. So on one hand, I'm going to say, wow, 35 houses, and some of them, maybe somebody I might know might possibly get into one of them. But I also look at it and go, hey, we could have had 80. Why don't we have 80? Why don't we have a general plan? Why are we looking at a general plan or a zoning that was done more than 30 years ago that says you should only have 6 places on these size houses, on these size lots? It doesn't make sense to me given the situation we're in Sonoma County right now. I also want to call out something that I keep hearing and I see sort of throughout a lot of these planning documents, which is it has to fit the neighborhood. So I looked at Clothier Lane, I walk around there. They have 2-car garages. They have 3-car garages, some of them. This is not, we don't have to match that. We're a small town. Let's put people of different incomes and different backgrounds in the same 2 or 3 block area. It's really not a problem. My neighborhood, I live in a housing unit that was made back in the height of the oil crisis, and it was low income. And I walk my dog,
That's
I don't
30
think it's a
seconds.
block away. And I'm in houses that are much, much fancier, and we get along, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any others who would like to come forward and speak?
Hi, I'm Katrina Brown. Hi, Brian. We've spoke a couple times. I'm the neighbor that lives at the top, directly behind Lot 14. I submitted the comments earlier. And I know that there was a discussion about a condition to this approval, that there would be a meeting prior to excavation or grading or anything like that. And I'm just unclear on when that meeting would take place, and what the mechanism would be to resolve any issues that arise as a result of that meeting, and what information would be brought to that meeting. I just want to make sure it's not just, we're going to get together and talk about, the same things we've talked about here, but that there would be some sort of actual substance that would allow informed decisions to be made, or some sort of foresight as to any impacts of the proposed excavation and grading. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carla, do we have anyone online or on the phone that wants to speak?
Thank you, Chair Savage. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Chair Savage, it looks like that'll end public comment.
Okay. I think we have one more public comment here in the chamber.
Maybe just a few questions. James DeWald, I live on Clothier. I've never done one of these things before, so I'm just curious, I wonder about water pressure. Do you guys look into, effects that it's gonna have on our neighborhood with putting in a new neighborhood? I mean, it's gonna draw from, I guess, the resources that we do in our neighborhood. Is that something that's looked into?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask these? Or-
Yeah,
oh.
and I'll address that question.
Okay, that, and then, again, with the fencing, that's awesome. You guys are gonna allow new fences to go up with the 2-foot, lattice at the top. But then is there gonna be a little gap between the neighbor's fence? Is that still gonna be on our property lines, like those fences that are there? Just those items I was curious about.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I have a few questions. My name is Deborah Keith. I live on Clothier Lane. My questions regarding the construction. Is this going to be union construction using prevailing wages, local construction company supporting the local economy? Will these homes have solar panels to offset the energy strain, and also to look forward to California's legislature of electric cars for everybody? Will that be taken into account? And then I have a question regarding the park and lieu fee. Would that specifically go towards Helen Putnam Park, which is the neighborhood park that could use significant upgrades? And that would be the community park in which this community would be using. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Come forward.
Hi, I'm Joyce Delario.
Hi,
Hi, I live on McKinnon Court, which is on the other side of this, where the subdivision is going to be. And my question is about traffic. We're going to have many more cars. So what are the plans for mitigating extra traffic and traffic control? So I don't know if there are any, I'm assuming you guys did a study regarding that, right?
I believe staff will answer all the questions once
Yeah.
we've completed the public hearing.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other public comments? All right. Did you want to address the questions before we have council continue questioning, or?
Yeah, let me go on. So the gentleman at 8920 Clothier referred to the setbacks, and all those setbacks are appropriate. So I'm not sure what that one was about. The storm drain questions, the questions seem very detailed, and it's likely that that we're still at preliminary engineering. We may not have those answers, but I will let Charlie respond to that question. Just realize that what his question, it seemed to be, was like something that we would have a better idea as we went to final design, not the preliminary that we're at right there. As far as fire access, we do review these projects with the fire department, and within some of the reports, if you looked at them, you may have seen an old subdivision design, and part of it had that stub street much farther to the west, much farther uphill. We have moved that street down to accommodate requirements of the fire department, that they don't have long block lengths and that they have adequate turnaround areas, as well as that cul-de-sac can accommodate the turning of a truck, fire apparatus. So those do apply. As well, there can be conditions where developments meet a certain size, and then you have to provide multiple access routes. It's not applicable in this particular project through the review of the fire department. They just want to make sure that there's adequate pressure for sprinklers. And then that actually is a good segue to the question about water. Yes, we had the applicant, we hired Carollo, who's the city's consultants for the water and sewer master plan. And they review not just the ability, the capacity, the city's capacity to provide the water, but whether or not there's any infrastructure deficiencies, like pipe needs to be upsized or anything like that. And we found that, one, that there was sufficient capacity, there were no deficiencies in the system, and there would be nothing about the project that would cause any problems or exacerbate any other problems that exist. And then for your interest, and as well as public, if you go to our projects in progress page on the website, you go to the Flayhaven Estates or Pink Viking project, all of these reports are available and can be reviewed by any member of the public. And so if they want to read the water and sewer report, that's there for them. If they want to read the soils reports, that's there. And I want to just let people be aware that those are there for their review. So the water pressure is fine. As far as the fence designs, I didn't quite understand the question about. I think, yeah, the idea is that we would replace all that rear fencing there. So
There'd be one fence between the two lots.
one
not
fence,
two
yeah,
fences with
not
a
two
gap.
fences where you collect leaves and rot and stuff like that. So it'd just be one fence.
I will say, the only way that you could result in two fences is if one of the adjacent property owners is not
Yeah.
supportive of having that fence installed on their property, because typically it's put right on the property line. That would then force the developer to have to put the fence, double it up essentially.
The homeless issues, yes. We have to build housing, so I mean, we're obviously saying we're an advocate for the housing. We think that this one complies with the general plan and the envision for there. Part of the reason this is envisioned is another policy within our zoning code and our general plan, and it's kind of a planning term called transect planning, where the idea is you feather your development intensity in. So that's rural residential to the south there, it's rural residential to the west. You increase density and development intensity as you move towards your city center. And as it is, it's going to be fairly abrupt. You know, you're going to hit all of a sudden, you're going to go from kind of the rural residential that you see in the county to boom, kind of almost the same kind of feeling that you get when you get to Clothier coming up the street. It's just that we're going to extend that further south. But that's part of the reasons why it has that kind of zoning designation and not a higher density zoning designation, which would be more appropriate in our downtown, getting into the downtown area or more highly developed areas. Or, yeah, that's kind of the answer there.
I would just add, I absolutely own that our general plan has, I would say, maybe a somewhat of an antiquated perspective on housing. And our department will be advocating for a general plan amendment to be put into the city's budget. And we'll start those conversations with the city council in the springtime as we start to move forward to strategic planning for the next budget year.
To Ms. Brown's question, the substance of the meeting, well, we'll decide that together. We don't know yet. It was just made an offer here, but we want to make sure that you're feeling like your concerns are being addressed and that we're all communicating about the same thing. Right? Yeah, so we'll do that together, figure out the content of that meeting. Construction, what was the question about construction?
Union contractors, local
Oh,
construction.
yeah, there's no requirement for the city for that to be the case for this particular development. Whether or not that would be up to the builders. Solar panels, there's not an absolute requirement that they install solar panels, but there is what's Cal Green, which is the environmental kind of component of the California Building Code, has various tiers. There's like what's mandatory, then there's a tier 1 and tier 2. We're tier 1 mandatory, which means we have a higher standard than the normal zoning code, especially for energy efficiency. There are things you can do rather than, there's like a menu of things you can do. Solar power is one of them to meet your energy efficiency standards. In this case, I think they're going all electric. That might be another way to help you get there. So there's not an absolute requirement that they do solar, but they are going to have to meet that tier 1 energy efficiency standard, and there's different ways they can get there. EV charging, you may have noticed there is a planning condition that they do provide for the potential for EV charging in there. That doesn't mean they install it because these models and things change, but they've got to have the panel box ready to go for it and the conduit ready to accommodate it, and just have the electrical load capable of charging. And this is in response to an ordinance that the city council just passed a couple months ago. So.
It's worth knowing, the community and the commission, we have the highest EV charging requirements in the state here in Cotati.
And then the park and lieu, it can be used for capital improvements. It's largely up to the city council to determine how they want to spend their park and lieu fees. And then Joyce Delario, I actually responded to your email and gave you a link to where you can review the traffic report. But the traffic report concludes that there will be a negligible impact on traffic. It's barely measurable. And as I said earlier, talking about 0.2 seconds of delay during the worst hour at the corner of Valparaiso and Old Redwood Highway. It's insignificant. And it won't have any effect on the roadway capacity. And anything and any interruption that might come from cars waiting to turn into the development will be accommodated by the center turn lane that will be going in. So we just don't see any traffic impacts. There is a traffic analysis, and they didn't find any significant traffic impacts. I believe that was all the questions.
All right.
And unless I had other questions.
Also address, there was a comment about Putnam Park, and I know we have a lot of plans in the works right now for park improvements. Can you address that also, please?
So-
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the city council, the city manager has been conducting, along with the recreation department, public input, meetings and surveys to get input as to what improvements should be built at Putnam and Cater. And I believe the, upcoming budget cycle will include funding to make improvements to, Putnam Park specifically. And then, as JP mentioned, the in lieu fees are intended or required actually for capital improvements, so essentially new recreation facilities. So that can't be used for maintenance or replacement of existing. So they're a little bit different requirements, but it is worth noting that the city council has prioritized updating the parks, and we've started to see some of that, like Katati Park recently.
Thank you.
Do we have additional questions or comments from the commissioners?
I do. For George Malcolm, I looked up Lot 13, which I believe is the one you were talking about, and it does seem to be a one-story. It seems to be Plan 1. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm reading maps in that way. And then I'm looking at this page. What is this? Existing conditions and demolition plan sheet 2, which is kind of a topographical map, and I'm still going back to my concern over that hill and what that meeting will look like, because in this resolution, I am tasked to look at the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the city of Katati. And so I'm tempted to, and someone can have to talk me out of it at this point, say that we should wait until after that meeting has occurred and that hillside's been thoroughly examined before approving these plans.
So I would just say that from the city perspective, and it's worth noting, right now this is essentially, any planning level project is somewhat preliminary in the design. So typically the engineers would design the project to what they would call 30% standards. Because if the project isn't going to get approved, the need to analyze and design all the way to 100% construction drawings for a wall is unnecessary because it's not going to get built. And so today, what's being asked for the commission is a recommendation on the overall subdivision and specific conditions that are needed to make sure that design, if it moves forward, is adequate to address the life safety impacts that you've identified. So Public Works Department looked at the proposed design, including all the analysis of the soils report and the design of the retaining walls and improvements on these sites to the 30% level approximate, and they found that it's adequate in not creating a life safety issue, subject to the conditions, if it moves forward, that issue be fully analyzed and ensured that no impacts to the adjacent properties occur.
And first, I want to thank all the neighbors who sent in questions to the city. The city copies all of us with their responses to you, and that actually helps us with answering a lot of our questions. Something that never came up, and I know it's a concern I have, is in a lot of projects around the county, you see construction going on 7 days a week. Is this going to be a situation like that? Because that could be really disturbing to the livelihoods of the neighbors. Or are we going to have set hours and set construction date times?
No, there are set hours in construction. Basically, any exterior work can only happen Monday through Friday from 7 to 7. And then no work at all on Sundays, period. And then currently, they can do interior work. So after they have a close-in inspection, they can do interior work on Saturdays from 9 to 5. But no exterior work. That's currently the way it's structured now, though it does give the city authority to allow for additional construction on Saturdays. And I think we would just leave it to find out what is that construction, what is the, how are they responding to neighbor complaints and things like that. So no, it's limited. Basically, the construction window is largely Monday from 7 to 7, and this is consistent with our code. As well, we're requiring them to have like a noise complaint monitor, someone available that's going to be available to hear complaints, and respond to those complaints? Because are they starting early, or is there something too loud? Something like that. As well, we'll be monitoring the project.
And that would be like a phone number available to the net residents around the area?
That's right. They are required to have a sign on the property indicating who this person is and how to get a hold of them.
All right, thank you.
I'm confused. When I was reading this, it surely seemed to me like solar panels were gonna be there and the electric stations were gonna be at every house for cars, and that there were going to be fire sprinklers inside. Did I not read that? Am I incorrect?
State code, yes, there will be.
Thank you. And which is another reason why we don't, the fire trucks don't necessarily, they need to get to the hydrant, but maybe not the house, because the sprinklers are in there. I installed fire sprinklers once upon a time. They save lives.
Any additional comments?
Just kind of going back to Kimberly's comment about the soil report, were the samples all taken on this property, or were there any taken on the adjacent properties?
Do you know, Charlie?
The soil studies were done on this property, but P.S., it's very rare that a soils report is required at the tentative map stage. But the City of Cotari's engineering department and building department decided, because of the slopes that we have, they required us to do a soils report and the follow-up on the soils report. So, JP, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but if you knew how many times JP asked me to analyze and reanalyze those 5 lots to make sure that they conform to the technical aspect, to make sure that we're not gonna have these issues, it's at least 3 or 4 times. So, it's not for lack of analysis, but as Noah said, you get to a plateau where you say, okay, we required a lot more than we usually require for a tentative map, but we're gonna require more for the improvement plans, and if anything needs to be adjusted, they'll be adjusted. And again, to repeat myself, the immediate reaction of the soils engineer was, again, please emphasize to the commission, we don't have any stability issues, we don't have any slides, nothing on this site is concerning me that there's gonna be an issue. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, we're going to be looking at the resolution, which is on page 234 of the larger packet. And we've mentioned some add-ons. You had 2 in your presentation about the final height of that one being reduced from 29 to 28. And then also about the government code 66300D on the replacement site housing. And then we've talked about a couple more, the additional of the 2 feet lattice, and also maybe some additional wording around grading permits. You weren't sure where that should go. Do we need to read this resolution and then reference these 4 add-ons, or do we just need, okay. So we should, we can read the resolutions and just say with the aforementioned 4 add-ons.
Correct.
Okay, okay. So do we have a motion on the resolution?
I'll move that we recommend to the city council approval of the preliminary design review, a vesting tentative map, a tree removal permit, and a hillside development permit to allow construction of a 35-lot single-family home subdivision on a 7.1 acre parcel located at 8841 Old Redwood Highway, with the addition of the aforementioned extra conditions.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, Carla, could we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Long,
Approve?
Commissioner Moffett,
Can I ask another question? How did we decide to, sorry, I know, I'm out of order. How did we decide to word the 4th condition?
JP is going to see where in the paperwork it should be, if it should be in with the grading permit requirements, or there was another place.
My recommendation at this point would be that it would be, if this gets approved by the city council, then the next thing they're gonna start doing is preparing improvement plans, and grading plans. That's when we should have it. So basically, we're pretty much right after we finish this effort of approving the tentative plan. The grading permit would be much later, so I want to put that up as front as possible while we're actually doing the improvement plans. And by improvement plans, I mean that's building the roads and the infrastructure that the homes and the grading that the homes will sit on. So it's about as early as I can get it in the process after this process.
So what's the wording?
What would the wording be? Permittee shall work with city staff and the neighbor of that particular address to identify any potential impacts to, adverse impacts to their property. And it would be included in prior to the improvement plan approval.
And would mitigate issues? if any
They
were found?
would either have to avoid the issue, or amend the plans so that you can't, you simply can't do something that would harm another property. I mean, that's the bottom line. So if we identified something, it could be as severe as you're just not going to develop that lot at all. It could come down that way. Right now, there's no indication of that. But they would have to make sure that they avoid any kind of impact. So I wouldn't even say mitigate, because that's saying there would be an impact. I would just say we would have to avoid any kind of adverse impact.
Okay. Aye.
Commissioner Berman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gilardi,
Aye.
Chair Savage.
Aye. Okay, thank you, folks who've come in and shared your comments and questions and concerns. We appreciate that very much, and thank you, staff, and thank you to the development team for all your information and patience with us. Okay, moving on now to our next matter at hand, and this is the Cotati Active Transportation Plan update.
Senior Planner Harry's also has this item.
He gets a break. Come on. Poor guy. You need to go to the bathroom, JP. You want 5 minutes?
Take a 5-minute break, is that okay? All right. We'll reconvene at 7:43.
Thank you, Chair Savage, members of the commission. As I mentioned earlier, my name is JP Harris. I'm a senior planner with the city of Cotati. And in addition to project review, we also do long-range planning, and that's what we're talking about tonight. And that is what are our policies and procedures or action items going forward in terms of updating our active transportation plan. Historically, this, as a reminder, was called the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. We're adopting a more inclusive terminology, which is consistent with many jurisdictions around the country, and calling it an active transportation plan in recognition that there's a lot of ways of getting around besides just riding a bike and walking. A lot of different ways to roll around town as well. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So the agenda for this meeting, I'll give a little bit of background. I'll talk a little bit about what happened at November 6th. That was the last time we got together to talk about, mostly we talked about the vision, goals, and the draft project list. But really tonight's intention is to present and receive feedback from members of the commission and the public on policies and actions that we're considering. And then I'll briefly touch on what is the schedule and next steps, and then we can go into questions and discussion. Next slide, please. So just as an overview, this effort is largely being done by a consultant group called Fair and Peers, who have been hired by Sonoma County Transportation Authority to do a countywide bike and pedestrian master plan. And we are a part of that, kind of a local group that will fit into this larger countywide plan. Those are the other jurisdictions on the left that are participating. I will say Santa Rosa, you don't see them, but because they just finished their own bike and plan update. And Petaluma's in the process of doing their own particular update. But in general, Fair and Peers, their plan had these 7 various points, and we're pretty much here between 3 and 4, which is engagement and coordination and development of the projects and programs. In the next quarter, we'll be working on funding and implementation, draft and final plans, and then bringing it to the commission for review. And we're planning to do that by the end of the first quarter. That's our goal right now. Next slide, please. So we presented a vision last month. This vision was really developed by Sonoma County Transportation Authority in conjunction with the Countywide Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And the vision, I'll just read it for anyone that can't read it. It says, our guiding principles are to improve safety, connectivity, equity, and quality of life. The transportation system shall be safe and inviting for people of all ages and abilities to walk, bike, and roll for everyday transportation and recreation by providing a continuous and interconnected active transportation network, linking daily activities and housing, and supported by programs and policies that encourage walking, biking, and rolling. And from that vision, we developed 3 goals. So next slide, please. And the goals are connected and reliable, safe and well-maintained, community-oriented, and place-based. Now, these same goals and vision statement have been presented to other jurisdictions and bodies, and some people are recommending tweaks to this language. These are not necessarily, we can have our own. They can be, we can tailor these to Cotati a little bit. In fact, you'll be interested to see what comes out of some of these other conversations if we want to do that. I just want you to be aware, these are kind of came from the county, but we can do what we want to tailor them. Last time we did look at them and you seemed to accept them, so I've reiterated them here tonight. But again, opening the door if you want to recommend any changes to them. Next slide, please. Okay, that slide's almost impossible to read, and I apologize for its density of information. But essentially, the policies tier from the goals, and thank you. No, these are Cotati specific. So we created them and actually presented them to the Fair and Peers and Sonoma County Transportation Authority. And these are the ones we're going to present tonight to you. So this is really a staff this particular aspect is staff. So you have complete freedom to do whatever you like with these, modify them, delete them, add to them. These are Cotati specific. And these slides only list the policies. And I don't know how much you want me to go through, list all these policies, or if you want me to reference the particular packet page. Because some of these policies, like policy 1.1, has 5 different action items that go with it. And it might be easier to, well, Chair, kind of up to you, you know, like, I don't know if you want me to go through all these.
Like, if there's an ABC priority on these, and then kind of a ABCs to implement, or that type of thing, or if you're able to kind of call them out in that regard, or.
I haven't done that depth of prioritization on them. They are kind of, some are obviously necessary and some would be aspirational, to use Noah's word from last month. But I would.
The only specific thing, and I don't know if this is in policy 1-5, but we've had a lot of conversation about future development behind Lowe's and that connectivity to the existing city across 116. So would that pretty much all be covered by that policy 1-5, or is there more information regarding that specific issue in the other policies as well?
I would point to policy 1-1 and with related to the Lowe's or the development around Lowe's. And then the company, and this would be on page 267 of your packet. So the policy 1.1 is prioritize and implement bicycle and pedestrian projects identified in the ATP, that's this plan, and given the amount of funding available to Cotati. So action 1-1.1 specifically says require project sponsors as part of their development proposals to construct frontage improvements, internal bicycle and pedestrian circulation, and bicycle and pedestrian projects identified in the ATP that intersect their property.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And I would just add, these are separate from the individual project list, which we presented at the last meeting. So the idea is you have your policies and goals, and then as needs are identified, which we really did through the Vision Zero process and the active transportation.
Local roadway
I'm sorry,
safety.
the LRSP, that a lot of the community members really told us where some of the challenges and issues were. So that created the project list, and the idea is that these goals help you decide when and how you get those various projects built, whether by requiring developers to do it, or whether the city council finds some funding and prioritizes getting that into the CIP, the capital improvement project list. That is a 5-year rolling project list. So as you know, year 1 gets taken care of, the priorities bump up, and then more things get added into project 5 or year 5. And that does come to the planning commission every year. The idea is that it gets looked at for general plan consistency, but this document will ultimately become part of the general plan, and then you can look at that list in regards to this as you provide comments on that every year, and we'll report out on it.
Okay.
Is that list of projects that was presented last meeting, is that in order of priority, or is that just numbered?
It was just numbered.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. There is an intent to, and that was one of the, one of the steps that was on that first slide. There will be an attempt to prioritize these.
Yeah.
And we'll do that, but often what happens is everyone thinks they're all high priority projects.
Right.
And really what you end up doing is, as an opportunity presents itself, you go and you implement it. Like we'll try to do a better job of it than the last Bike and Ped Master Plan, but I think everything was like high priority, high priority, high priority. We meant one medium priority and everything else high, which is no prioritization really. But yeah, but we will try to prioritize them as well as identify potential costs associated with those projects.
Is there
Ballpark
any information, I know we call out where the projects are contingent upon development of that area. Are there any projects that are at the city's discretion that would be city dollars spent to, or is everything a developer?
Oh, no, there's several projects that involve city discretion.
Okay, those might be interesting to call out, because I think those we have a little more control over, hopefully, and maybe those, some type of an ABC prioritization within high A, high B, high C, since they're all high.
Yeah.
Something that could.
That makes
direct
a lot of
focus.
sense, because the other ones are matters of opportunity, like when they
Yeah.
come up, it's great
'Cause
to
I think
have a
if we're
high priority,
yeah.
but if the development never comes to implement the project, then
On the ones
What
that are
good?
discretionary, if we could at least see we're moving forward to some degree every year, then I think that would be a good thing.
all right, yeah, we'll make sure that we look at that as we put that draft plan together.
Thank you. One other thing we did just mention as a side note, we talked about the League of American Bicyclists, and maybe getting some type of a designation as, at least as a bicycle-friendly community, or a plat, or a silver or something like that. Did that go anywhere, or is
Yeah.
that something?
Maybe it would help if I go through them. I just don't know what the appetite of the commission was, but in specific to that, I considered that to be part of Goal 3, community-oriented and place-based. And so there is a policy 3-7, which is achieve a bicycle-friendly community rating from League of American Bicyclists.
Okay.
Now, I don't know the effort that it will take to do that. This is certainly going to require some research on my part, and talking to the city council and city manager about staffing resources.
Well, I think there might be some desire in the community for volunteer assistance too, if you need some assistance with that.
Okay. I see a volunteer. Someone who I know. Yeah, I was about to say, someone I know that's familiar with the program and can educate me, because I did throw it in there because we talked about it last
I
meeting.
appreciate that.
You brought it up specifically, and, but I haven't had a chance to figure out exactly what that entails.
I'd say maybe just, if anyone has any specific things they want to bring forward, we could talk in specifics, but I don't know if you need to go through the whole list, or do you
Yeah.
just think you wanted to go through the whole list, or?
I don't necessarily think so, no.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I was able to read through it on my own time.
I was just saying, if there's any other specific policies that people have questions about, or issues that were brought forward that these policies address, that you could direct us to. But does anyone else have anything else from our previous conversations, or?
Well, I like your suggestion of separating out those construction project funded versus city funded.
Yeah.
Because I know for years and years, we've always talked about filling the gaps. We have a lot of, core areas right in the downtown where there's not going to be any construction, but we still have to address, safe sidewalks and
I think the sidewalk on Valparaiso is a perfect example of that. That's an obvious need that needs to be fulfilled. We got to address that horrible pedestrian situation. And no one's going to come in and buy all those properties that allow us to complete it. City's just going to have to do it. And that's a perfect example.
Right.
What is the plan for that?
Well, there is a plan. I'm not totally informed on the plan, but I know that there's a sidewalk gap project coming forward from the Department of Public Works. I don't know the timing on that, but Valparaiso is identified. I also think that they're going to have some sort of survey or reach out with the neighbors there, because I think in the long term, something's got to be done about the width there. And so they may only allow parking on one side to accommodate it. But I think there's a few moving pieces to it, but I think it's like 2 or 3 years out. I think is the idea of fixing that. Is that right?
I do believe it's sooner than that. I think it's gonna be put in the, council budget, proposed to be put in the council budget for the next fiscal year.
Because I've been hearing even council talk about it for a couple of years now.
It needs to be done. And then there's about 8 other gaps, or, half a dozen other gaps that will be addressed. That one's just glaring problem. I mean, like on Olaf, there's a little spot where you're walking and all of a sudden it just stops. But of course, there's a nice, beautiful tree that we want to make sure gets protected, so that's going to take a little extra design work. But, yeah, there's a few of those areas. Maybe, kind of on that, policy 1-2 is something new, and that the city's 5-year capital improvement program shall incorporate and include funding for bicycle and pedestrian projects. I mean, we've not had this policy specifically call this out as a requirement, and so now it'll be in part of city policy if that one goes forward. So you'll see these things get worked in to the city's capital improvement program, which historically has been largely streets, and pipes, and not enough attention on bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So this raises the bar. One of the policies is that it suggests that we put a sidewalk on every street, and that sidewalk be sensitive to what side does that go on, what is the material made out of. Well, we need to have a way for people to get around and not feel like they have to walk in the street. So that one's kind of a new one. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, so that's the policy that's before the commission this evening, and so we are, it's 1-4 would say all public streets shall have a sidewalk connecting to the broader network on a minimum of one side. And so if the commission is concerned with that, this is the time to provide that input, because we talk about like downtown, some of these, very central streets, there's no sidewalk on either side in some of those situations. From the staff perspective, getting pedestrian circulation in the core of the city is important and critical. But to your point, not every neighbor will be happy with that decision. And if a city project comes in to put those sidewalks in, some people will not be supportive of that, including those who are having their frontage changed. So this is the time for the commission to provide input. Maybe one way to modify that would be in the core of the city or something like that. So it would help to prioritize where those go, or the core of the city, and including on identified circulation routes to youth serving uses such as parks or schools, those types of things, nuance that we're looking for from the commission.
What you said.
Yeah, I can see, we definitely don't need a sidewalk on both sides of all of our streets.
No.
But I really think for safety issues, there should be at least one on one side of a street. And that might ease the concerns of people who don't want a sidewalk whatsoever, because we do have to take safety into consideration.
And limited mobility, people have
Exactly.
limited mobility, having some type of option at least,
I noticed in policy 3.3, it talks about using different types of materials, so maybe we could word it so that it doesn't necessarily have to be a sidewalk. It could be a neighborhood fitting, pedestrian pathway.
Yep. The little sidewalk around the little ranch here is a perfect example of that, where a regular sidewalk would have kind of detracted from the historical ranch feel. So the natural material worked better. And we like it. We think it's working pretty well.
Yeah, I like the DG paths throughout the city.
Yeah.
They come out.
Is that what they did out there by the park off of Myrtle when they put that pathway along?
I have to go and look at that. I probably did use that same type of surface.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
because
a
I know Damien really
awful
likes it.
granite.
And so wouldn't be surprised if that's what it was. Good.
Yeah, I feel that there's some very small kind of rural roads in Cotati up in the hills that probably don't need sidewalks. Not many, but there are a couple. So it does seem odd that it says all public
Yeah.
streets.
Yeah, or maybe they could be prioritized based on, foot traffic or, use. I'm not sure how we could have determined, there were studies done that, was it just traffic analysis on the streets, or was it also foot traffic and pedestrian use, bike use?
We're going to have, that's another part of the piece of the puzzle that Fair and Piers is working on. They're doing a sidewalk gap analysis. And the part of, I wish they were here tonight to tell you, there's a method they have of determining and prioritizing these gaps and whether or not there's even a need for them. I'll be honest, I had the same feeling that there probably is like certain areas of the city where we don't need a sidewalk. And I have always been surprised when someone says, have you tried walking down that street? Do you know how dangerous it is? And then I'll be like, oh, I thought we would never want to see a sidewalk there like Cypress. There's a big section of Cypress and they're like,
Okay, but Cypress is a busy street.
Well-
So I would think that Cypress would actually have some gaps
Yeah.
that it could use.
Yeah.
But some of these offshoots of West School Street, on the other hand.
well,
Does
with
every
West School, the
offshoot-
idea is to get people to Thomas Page safely. So that,
But every offshoot doesn't
Oh, yeah.
go anywhere. Many of them don't.
many of those
go
are
anywhere.
private roads too.
Some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Well,
But again, it's why that all seems problematic.
We could use language like through streets, so basically cut out things that are dead ends, maybe as a potential. But we don't have to get the wording exactly right tonight. I think what we're hearing is look at some options and come back with some suggested language that would try to address the majority of the streets, but allow some flexibility in accommodating that very rural area where it may not
Be
fit.
worth the fun.
Yeah.
And then the
That'll be
D's will
better
just
to look at.
kind of hang
I mean,
out
I
down
live on a
there
road
and
where we
never be
wouldn't
worried about anyways.
So, I mean, I
What
get
kind of
it. I live
fantasy
on
world
that.
am I living in where we have funding for all of it?
Yeah, I think prioritizing them. The funding.
Couple other things, is this new bicycle class. It's called Class 4, which is a protected bikeway. So this is different from a trail, which was a Class 1. Class 2 is a wide lane. Class 3 is basically a sign that says bikes are on the road. Class 4 offers you a little more protection. You're on the street, but there's a buffered separation between you and the car, and it include physical barriers, could be a curb, could be bollards. So that's a new type of facility, and what that does is it reduces the stress of a biker, especially someone like me that doesn't like to bike on the street. It makes it a little easier for me to want to do that, and that way it will help to encourage some biking. Some streets, for example, where I think that'd be ideal is, first of all, Redwood Drive, which is a really terrible kind of biking situation. And I would like to see it explored on East Cotati Avenue as well by maybe reducing lane widths or whatever we could do.
When they've redone that side road there, is that what you're talking about?
It looks very close.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks very close to what we're talking about. In fact, when I first went in, I'm like, did we just build a Class 4 bike lane? Because it sure looks like one, but I don't know if technically that would qualify. I think it's more of a sidewalk, but it looks very similar to that type of protection. Another thing we want to do is we want to, like, there's some of our parks, we don't even have bicycle parking. So one of the policies is to promote more, first of all, go around and look at the city and find out where we're deficient, talk to people like Eris, who knows probably exactly where we're deficient in bicycle parking, and address those, remedy those problems. Like, it's ridiculous that there's not a bike parking at a park, that's just absolutely.
Is there an advertising opportunity to have those funded through local businesses with advertising on the parking? I mean, is that? Well, something
I don't have
tasteful,
that policy yet.
not neon or anything like that.
call?
No, but something like, I don't know, I'm just saying, if funding is an issue and parking is, kind of a need, I didn't know if those, the city might be adverse to those type of things, I don't know. Well, that too.
Well, action item 1.1, going back to that one, has us identify all kinds of various funding sources, from private development to updating our traffic impact fee to working with local state partners. So the door is open for any way we can get the money to do it. We're going to be looking for that. Because that is usually how it happens. If we don't have a private developer doing it, it's usually got to be grant funded, or it's got to be worked into the CIP and programmed 5 years out.
For the grant funding, how's that application process work? Are you guys actively applying, or do you have to get the plan established first and then use that to apply?
There's various types of grants. Some you can do like planning level work. Some don't allow you to do planning level work. You can only do project level work. Some require you have a much more thought out project. Some allow you to be a little loose with the description.
And I would just add, where projects have become really high priorities, the city has, the council and working with the city manager and often Public Works has essentially funded the design to get it more shovel ready. You hear that term a lot of times for grants. And the West Katati intersection is one of those where it's, we've known it's a problem for a long time. There was money in the budget this year to design that project. And so that project's under design, we're funding it. But the idea is that the construction comes from a variety of grant sources, a federal earmark, adjacent development, and we're going to apply for some Sonoma County Transit money as well. So as JP said, there's just a stack of financing that goes and grant options that go. And we typically, as they come up, we try to go for all of them.
So the city's already actively pursuing those. This is just kind of codified in the sense, this policy.
And tying it specifically to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements, a lot of times our grant efforts have been more focused on automotive infrastructure. And I would say the timing's really good because all of the various transportation dollars are recognizing the need to pivot to that from the federal level all the way down through the state. And so the expectation is now that, for example, like Caltrans improvements include bicycle and pedestrian elements, which, historically Caltrans would not want you to do that. So we're all changing our perspective and our priorities on trying to really round out transportation space.
One program in here is to continue to work with the SCTA to develop a regional bike share micro mobility program. This is something we've been working on with the SCTA for 2 or 3 years now. We were all ready to go, and then the company that was going to do the project simply nationwide stopped answering phone calls, stopped responding to anybody, and just abandoned their whole project everywhere around the nation. And however, actually this week, Sonoma County I think it's this week, the Sonoma County Transportation Authority is going to look at offering or signing a contract with another company. Bird? I can't.
No, it wasn't Bird. It's one I've never heard of.
Drop, thank you. Yeah, Drop. I looked at their website, and they are nationwide also, and hopefully this will be more successful. But hopefully we'll start to see that program come in this summer. And the ideal thing with that is we'll probably have 2 stations, one at the Katati train station and then right downtown. So the idea, hopefully, will promote getting to and around. Coupled with that, and this is very preliminary, we want to start having discussions with SMART, Sonoma State, Roanoke Park, whomever that would be interested in getting an electric shuttle that moves between points of interest, either consistently or on demand, on a schedule or on demand. So that way, yeah, you know, this is, if you want to get people out of their cars, give them an opportunity to get from point A to point B and then let them walk around there. That's how we're going to do it. And so that's something that we're at the very, very, very beginning of trying to form how we would do that and who we'd meet with.
Just as a side note, you know, the Airport Express has come up here from the airports to the Doubletree.
Yep.
And anything that would include a Doubletree stop would add an additional leg into that, you know.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
Super helpful feedback. So Smart has reached out to us. They have that airport shuttle right now, and it's a pilot program for 3 years, and they got a grant to fund that. But they're already seeing the benefits of that and are looking to expand that type of service around their current Smart stations. And one of the benefits of Cotati is we have both north and south stops in very close proximity. Most of the stations don't provide that, and so they're seeing it as a centralized location, and they're going to start exploring options for a similar mobility shuttle that would include Sonoma State, potentially destinations in Roner Park. So that hotel is a great idea to then tie into the airport situation. It's excellent.
It's the hub of Sonoma County.
And then there's also some, you know, more in the Aris Camp, more educational stuff. We want to see what we can do through Parks and Rec about getting more bike education, working with Thomas Page Academy, and Safe Routes to Schools program, which I don't think Cotati has been very active in all these years. So there's some policies to engage and get more engaged in that activity.
Do you know what percentage of students at Thomas Page Academy are bused in?
I do not.
It's a lot.
Most, right? I think it's most.
Could be.
That's why years ago we did the whole safe route to school, and that going back many years, when Marcia Sue was involved with the city, we actually walked a path that went through some of the properties, and unfortunately some of the property owners like, no, we don't want the kids walking through here, but we had to come up with some type of safe system because, you know, unfortunately with both mom and dad working, not all kids can either take the bus or get someone to pick them up, so there was a lot that were walking at that time, but I think now a lot of them actually are on the buses.
Yeah, I think the majority.
Those are highlights. If you,
Are we in question?
wait, I have everybody, yes, of course.
How's the community advisory board going?
The Community Advisory
Weren't you
Board.
creating an advisory board on this issue?
So that's for the Centaur Way specific plan update.
Dang it. Sorry.
And I will speak to that as a part of the department report.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, I must have dropped something.
After we go through see if we have anything else. And then before we go to public comment, do any of the commissioners have any other questions or comments for JP?
Yeah, in the outreach summary section of the report, it talked about the project website or webpage being set up and an online survey. I was wondering if you've gotten any feedback or any results or from those efforts. Or if there's just been any public feedback in general about these.
Oh, okay, yeah, that survey is one that's being hosted by SCTA and Fair and Peers. And I know that they got tremendous amount of feedback, I want to say.
Like countywide or?
Yeah, countywide. So I don't know how much of that is Cotati specific, but I did know that they got a pretty good amount of feedback. Also, we have a lot of data that we've been collecting for 2 years. We had kicked this thing off in 2021 and unfortunately had to pull back because of staffing and other issues. But we gathered a lot of data and feedback in 2021. And then at the same time, we went through the local roadway safety plan, which even though it's called local roadway safety plan, you know, it was, for Cotati, I would say the majority of the concerns and issues that were identified and location-based were bicycle and pedestrian issues. So that survey that SCTA did was something similar to that, where you could basically identify a problem area and something like that. So we've got, I would say, a really good chunk of information between the various surveys on identifying where problem areas are in the city.
And that help inform the plan,
That-
the
That's
the
pur-
project list and the policies and whatnot.
That's the purpose of it, yep.
All right, we'll go to public comment then. If you'd like to come forward, Eris. All right, do we need, is the timer broken earlier? Is the timer fixed? Or no is our timer?
Eris Weaver, I'm the Kentucky resident and the executive director of Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. And I have been so happy with how this whole process has been going countywide with barricades. I've been in many meetings and presentations throughout the county, and with the different consultants. I've been out on bike rides with the consultants and former Commissioner Neil Hancock and some other folks. We've been out on bike rides with Noah, getting out and seeing what's going on. And the consultant who's the one in charge of Kentucky actually lives in Sonoma County, which is always true when you get these consultants, so they know where they are. So been very happy with a lot of how this whole process has been going. So I don't mostly have a list of good things to say. I have very little nitpicking tonight. Uncharacteristically, right? I'm usually, I joke at my job, I get paid to complain. The thing that's most revolutionary in this whole thing is policy 1.5, that class 1 and 4 facilities should be the first choice. This is something that we have been pushing out in all the jurisdictions for years, and to see this actually encoded in the plan is great, because that's what we need to get people on bikes who aren't. I've been trying to cheat me out on bikes, but been unsuccessful for a while. And this year, 3 of the jurisdictions, Windsor, Santa Rosa, and Petaluma, have installed the class 4 bike lanes. So if you want to see what they look like, we're talking about on North McDowell in Petaluma, on Armorator in Santa Rosa, and then Windsor, it's on Brooks Lane. But there's the green painted lane, but then there's this barrier with vertical elements, and it feels so much safer to be in there riding. It's much more encouraging to get people out there riding. However, then in Action 161, when it's talking about the low stress, wanting to make a lower stress network, it mentions class 1, 4, and 3, and I would suggest removing class 3. I have no use for class 3, because usually what that means is let's throw Shero on the street and call it good, and it doesn't really change behavior or change safety, so why even talk about it? That might be my only nitpick here. I love Action 171 about making sure about adequate bike parking. I would love to also see the city adopt a standard for what counts as acceptable bike parking, because there's a lot of racks that don't really work. Unfortunately, on a piece of property I own is a rack that doesn't work very well, and most of the racks downtown aren't great. So I'm happy to give design guidance to staff, but if you're going to put money into having them, you want to make sure that they are secure for all kinds of bikes. And
That was-
173 on having bike parking for big events. That is a service that my organization provides. It's not free, but it's not very expensive either. To have a valet parking for bikes, or we also will rent out racks if folks want to.
We're at that magical 3-minute mark, so if you could send your additional comments to the staff, we would love to have them.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
But whoever fixed the bike detection at the light at Centero in East Kentucky, thank you. It fixed my bike now, and for years it hasn't.
Nice slacks, Eris. All right, do we have any other questions or comments from commissioners?
A question, what Eris brought up on 161.
I have to finish the presentation.
A lot of our streets, because of the width. We can't do everything. So if we removed class 3 bicycle boulevards, what would we replace it with?
I'm not gonna, I'm gonna take the comment to heart, but I want to talk to Fair and Piers about it because they, actually added that in there. We had it 1 and 4. But then they thought class 3 boulevard, and they specifically used the word boulevard, and I apologize for not knowing exactly what they meant by that, but I'm gonna explore that one a little more. It might be a perfectly appropriate, bike facility for Cotati.
Thank you.
Oh, Chair Savage, I did want to add, we do have one Zoom attendee with their hand raised.
Okay.
So Neil Hancock, you have the floor.
Yes, hello. I'd just like to echo Eris's comments, particularly about Class 1 and Class 4, and also the discussion that came up in the Commission on the Policy 1.4 about all public streets shall have a sidewalk, that it should be maybe may have a sidewalk, but specifically, I would suggest adding that the sidewalk be considered either a class 1 or, you know, even on some of the roads, you would really improve safety with, let's say, a class 4 on part of Valparaiso. So that might be just one section of it where there could be this separated, safe pedestrian walkway. And also really like the, you know, what happens around Folletti Park, where it's the granite area. So those are really, really nice ideas. One other, on the vision and goals, just with the connectivity, I would suggest also that there be some consideration from Cypress Avenue to Old Redwood Highway. There's not a lot of opportunities there, but there may be some opportunities if a walkway or if a class 1 was sketched in from Cypress Avenue to Old Redwood Highway, approximately along the current line of the Cotati boundary. But there are, you know, there are some potential roads in there from McKinnon Circle up on Cypress Avenue and possibly an extension of Laker Lane. If those go in the plan now, for anybody considering it, they may be able to incorporate some pedestrian connectivity along that. That would fit in with the city's goals of trying to make it easier. Anybody up on Cypress Avenue could then get down to buses if they're walking, but it could also be something for kids to interconnect with neighbors. So just a couple of comments there. Really appreciate it that you're looking at this future aspect of what it is for walking or active transportation in Cotati. It's a hard job, and it's been a difficult process to get everything up there. So thank you very much.
Does that complete the online comments?
Yes, Chair Savage.
Any additional comments from commissioners? All right, we'll turn it back. Thank you very much for the presentation. All right, any reports by staff?
Just briefly touch on a few things going on in the department separate from what was discussed this evening. As Commissioner Moffett mentioned, we have efforts underway for the Santero Way specific plan. We had our first technical advisory committee meeting, so the goal of that is kind of people who have technical input. So we had our infrastructure utility experts from Carollo, we had Sonoma County Transit there, we had SMART there, internal city staff to meet to just kind of lay out some of the groundwork and expectations and discuss how we're going to move forward with this project. Fire department was there. Some of the things that we need to be aware of and be thoughtful about as the project starts to get some traction. And then we just today sent out invites for the Community Advisory Board or Community Advisory Committee. All applicants were accepted, so we did not turn back anyone who volunteered to participate. And so we were able to get a lot of different perspectives, neighborhood, people who live in the neighborhood, people who own businesses in the neighborhood, people who use transit, use the train station, all those types of folks, property owners who don't live there but do have interest because they own property. And so the first meeting will be on the 17th. We were gonna give the commission, the choice of having those meetings be public or internal. If we want them to feel very comfortable giving their kind of unvarnished opinions, and so, we're gonna discuss kind of the costs and benefits of having those meetings be public and open to anyone who could attend, or having those be, closed meetings just for the commission. This is the Community Advisory Commission for the Centerra Way Plan, to be able to provide their input, kind of as they want, without having to worry about kind of some of the judgment that can go with that. And then obviously that would be reported and summarized in the report outs to the public and to the Planning Commission and City Council.
Is that January 17th?
January 17th, and the meeting is at the Cotati Depot train station first. Again, like I said, it's not a public meeting yet, but we may have the next 2 meetings be public, or 3. There's 3 or 4 meetings total planned for that, that body to meet and review the plan and provide input. And if it is gonna be a public meeting, they will occur in the chamber. So we'll be able to have the ability to, you know, have it go out on the city's YouTube channel, be broadcast, so anyone can kind of watch and see those deliberations in that process. I'm not sure. I know we have some folks who are younger. I'm not sure we have any high school age. We were hoping to get some, but I will say, as of this week, we are having some of our consultant staff open an office in the depot building. So there will be people in the plan area available, working for walk-in input to be provided during the day for people who are riding the train, coming by, visiting the area. It's called embedded planning. It's kind of a newer term, and the idea is bring the office to the people, so that way you're making it as easy as possible for people to let you know what it's like for them to have their experiences in the area that you're updating the plan for. So really excited about that.
Yeah, how many volunteers?
I think around 10. Yeah, so it should be a pretty robust discussion, and we're looking forward to it. And as I mentioned, I will keep the commission up to date on that process, and let the public know whether those meetings are going to be open. But the first one will be on the 17th, and it's from 6 to 7, but that's not an invitation. That's just informational at this point. But more information will be received and provided later. This is the last Planning Commission meeting for 2023. Thank you all for your hard work. This was a new commission at the beginning of this year, and you guys have been excellent. I will say our workloads will ramp up a little bit. We kind of canceled quite a bit of meetings at the earlier part of the year, but we're anticipating a busy winter, definitely. As we mentioned, the next meeting, December 18th, is canceled, so this is the last meeting for 23. And because both of the Planning Commission dates fall on holidays in January, we're holding a special meeting on January 16th. So that is a meeting date that's set. That'll be the first meeting in January, so we will have the Planning Commission reorganization on that agenda. Typically in that process, the vice chair agrees to serve as the chair, and we nominate a new vice chair. So if commissioners could look at their schedules and identify whether or not they have the ability and interest in serving as the vice chair for next year, they would be nominated. Somebody will be making nominations, and then there will be a vote on who would be the vice chair. Please feel free to reach out to me to let me know if you're interested or opposed to being in that role, and then we can have conversations with the commission ahead of that meeting to help facilitate that conversation. Because the voting and the discussion on who will be, it is Brown Act, so it needs to occur at the meeting. But that's per our bylaws, that's one of the orders of business we do at the first meeting of January. And so.
Is that the only meeting in January?
That is the only meeting in January. And then looking forward, February, there's also a President's Day holiday in February. And so the only meeting we'll have in February is on the 5th. Both of those meetings will have items. And I will update the advanced agenda and send it out. And my goal is to get that onto the Planning Commission public agenda so the community can start to see what meeting dates we anticipate certain projects falling on. There's an asterisk at the bottom of that advanced agenda that says that, you know, it is subject to change, but the goal would be to be as transparent as possible with people being able to see what projects are in the pipeline and coming down to decision dates. But that's all I have to share. We will be getting into the new year, as I mentioned, and starting to talk to the city council about strategic planning, getting ready for what's going to be in our work plan for the next fiscal year. And I'll be reporting out on all the things that the council assigned us and where we are with moving forward with those, so the commission can kind of see what the rest of our workload for the second half of this fiscal year, which is basically January through June of 2024, looks like.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any reports by planning commissioners? No? All right. Any information, additional information received after the agenda?
There were several emails received after the agenda was posted. Those were provided to the commission and provided in the back, hard copies, and the agenda was amended to include that information for anything that was received prior to about 3:30, 4 o'clock today, and then anything else that came in after that will be added to the agenda after tonight.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Wait. I want to thank Chair Savage for stepping up with a bunch of rookies. I think you've done a really terrific job.
Well, thank you.
And I'm really grateful to you.
Well, I would consider you all rookies of the year.
Ah!
So it's mutual admiration. Thank you very much.
So, all right. Move to adjourn.
A second?
I'll second that.
Roll call?
Commissioner Long. Aye. Commissioner Moffett.
Aye.
Commissioner Berman.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gilardi.
Aye.
Chair Savage.
Aye. Thank you so much.